So I texted her, I said, it won't happen overnight until you've gone through all of the steps to get there. And then one day you'll wake up and be like, oh my God, this happened overnight. The steps in between are actually evidence that what you want to see, what you want to experience is literally happening right now. So the other day I was texting a friend who's also on the journey to her life of maximum fulfillment. And she's actually finally working in the industry of her dreams, which 2 to 3 years ago, she had no idea how or if that would ever happen. And so I was congratulating her, asking her if she was excited. And she was like, yeah, I don't know. I'm just ready to start bearing fruit. And so in my head, I'm like, wait, what? Girl, you're literally in the exact industry that you wanted to be in just 2 years ago, doing exactly what you wanted to do. And on top of it, you're a top talent at your job. How could you not be bearing fruit? And that's when I remembered that people serve as mirrors for us. And in that moment, I saw how I had been thinking the exact same way about my own situation for so long. In fact, for the bulk of this year, actually, I had been thinking and operating in this way, and it created so much frustration. All I could ever think was, when is it all just gonna happen already? But since coming back from my period of self-isolation, I noticed that I've really changed my perspective on this, and it's helped so much with bringing back the fun in chasing my dreams and my life of maximum fulfillment. So I figured I would share some of the things I've been doing when I start to feel like, yo, is this ever gonna happen? So first, zoom out and count your blessings. Literally count them. And I know it's annoying. I used to hate when I would see those memes or when people would post quotes that basically said, you're living the life that you once prayed for. Because I used to be like, okay, but like I still don't have the thing that I want, the other thing that I want. But in reality, it's so true, right? And it's really important to recognize that, because in this moment right now, it is what it is. And if you really took the time to just look around, you would see all of the things that 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago, you were desperate and begging for all around you, right? So it's kind of a long-winded way of saying be grateful for where you are and what you have now. But I think framing it in that way of, yo, you literally were desperate for this at one point, and now you don't even think about it. You don't even think about it to the point where you can't even see how much and how far you are, because you're so focused on this one little thing that just hasn't happened yet, when all these other things have, right? So that's just a little context, but here's how I actually started to shift my perspective. Once I actually took that annoying saying to heart, I started to really think back to those moments that I was super desperate, right? And we'll just use an example. We'll talk about my journey in coming back to New York, right? Coming back to New York was so important to me after I had left, I don't know, like 3 times. The first time was for undergrad. I transferred because I was depressed and having a lot of issues. The next time I came back was for grad school, and that was literally the worst year of my life. So I went back home. And when I was back home, I remember just dreaming and wishing that I could come back, but I had no idea how I was gonna do it, because I was like, well, I ain't gonna do no 9-to-5 job that would allow me to live there. So I don't know how I'm gonna get back there. Cool, right? So like I said, I went back to that time, like how I felt, how kind of helpless I felt, how I felt like, honestly, this might never happen because I really don't see myself ever getting a 9-to-5 job. And at the time, that was the only way I saw myself being remotely able to live in New York City, right? And so I brought myself back to that time, and I started to really feel those emotions, being in my parents' house, low-key embarrassed, all my friends killing it, right? Because like, all of my friends are literally phenoms in the world. They're writing books. They're, you know, top executives at Google and KKR, like real name brand stuff, right? So, so I'm thinking back and I'm like, wow, I'm just so behind, and if only I could just be in the place that I wanted to be, blah, 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 right? Cool. I'm going back to that moment and really feeling those emotions, right? Because the human mind or the human brain doesn't really know the difference between what you're imagining and what's actually happening, because we have that ability to feel, and that sends a signal to the brain, right? Of like, okay, I'm feeling like this, right? These emotions are rising up in me. And so I literally brought myself back to the moment. Then I kind of zoomed out of that, right? Like, it's almost like I came out of myself and looked around, and I'm like, wait a minute. I'm living in New York City, 1. 2, I upped the ante a little bit, because I thought about when I first came back to the city and I was couch surfing and I was literally sleeping on the floor. I did not even have a bed. Never mind my own place. I did not have a bed. Now I'm in my own place, in my own bed. Now, granted, we all know that, like I said, we move into a life of maximum fulfillment. And right now the focus is stepping into financial abundance and that whole process, right? So cool. I have all these things, but at the same time, sometimes I feel a little insecure, because I'm like, I can barely pay, or, oh my gosh, how am I going to pay XYZ, right? But the fact of the matter is, I'm no longer in my parents' house stressing about how I'm going to get here. I'm literally here. Even if certain things aren't exactly how I want them to be, there was a time that all I could think about, let alone the rest of it, was just being here, and then being here, having my own space and my own bed. Right? And so I give you that example because I want you to actually try that. Like, take yourself back to a time, look at something that you have now that you're like, yeah, I used to want that, you know, but now it's so regular to you that you can't really, it's hard to, you know, generate those feelings of like, oh my God, like I can't believe I have this, or I'm here now, right? So really go back to the time before you had whatever it was, or before you learned XYZ, and think about like how you felt for real, and sit in those feelings, zoom out, and then look at where you are now. And I swear it changes everything. It's something that I've started to do almost on command. Like when I start feeling anxious about something, especially because like in my case right now, it's a financial thing, right? So if I'm feeling anxious about something or whatever, I really bring myself back to this present moment and do that exercise of remembering like, yo, there was a time when you couldn't even do this. You know what I'm saying? You couldn't even experience what you're experiencing right now. So yeah. So another thing that helped me to shift my perspective was realizing, well, if it happened before, why wouldn't it happen again, right? Like, why wouldn't it happen again? There was a time when I had no idea how I was gonna live here or be here, right? And here I am. So there's no reason why the other things that I'm looking for, in this case, you know, rounding out my life of maximum fulfillment by really like padding it with the cash, there's no reason why that wouldn't happen, right? Maybe it's not happening in the time that I would want it, or, you know, the word I used in the title was overnight, right? A lot of times we get into that feeling of like, when is it gonna happen? And it's almost like we're expecting something to happen overnight. Even if it's not happening overnight, that doesn't mean it's not happening. Because going back to what I was talking about earlier, when I was talking to my friend, we were texting and she was like, hey, I'm waiting to bear fruit. And I literally told her, matter of fact, I'm gonna read this because I don't wanna mince the words. I said, it won't happen overnight until you've gone through all of the steps to get there. And then one day you'll wake up and be like, oh my God, this happened overnight, right? And so the important piece to take from that is the steps, right? I used to call it doing the time. I don't know why I'm using jail references, but every little moment is leading up to that one day when you wake up and you feel like, wow, this happened overnight. And I'm saying this because, you know, recently I've been going through a lot of gut health issues, which we're going to talk about. There's a lot that I have to inform you about. But anyway, I've been going through this process, following this protocol, and realizing like, okay, things are getting better. And I remember I was like a month and a half in, and one of my friends was like, so how's it going? I'm like, it's good, but I still feel like there's such a long way to go. And I remember right at the 2-month mark, one day I woke up and everything felt different. But the reality was it was a gradual process, like over the 2 months, right? Like I remember different periods of like, oh yeah, this is a little different, but still feeling like I'm not really where I want to be yet, right? And then at 2 months, I woke up and I was like, whoa, everything is very different. And granted, I still have a lot to work on. And like I said, we're going to talk about that. But the point is, those steps in between are really important, one. And then two, the steps in between are actually evidence that what you want or what you want to see, what you want to experience is literally happening right now. The overnight thing is, I feel like, one of those fallacies that we kind of get trapped in because now we live in this time of everything being instantaneous, at your fingers, microwave, like it happens like that. You know what I mean? Instant gratification. But the reality is like things are happening every instant, you know? And so if you can keep your mind in a certain frame, you can start to like accept that. And I feel like when I was saying, I feel more excitement now and more hope around what I'm doing, what I'm working on, what I'm creating, because I've been able to like really whittle it down to being in this moment right now and understanding that this moment is when it's happening, so that, you know, whatever day in the future I wake up and I'm like, oh my God, it happened overnight. But also to realize that there's so much that is already here right now. It's not like I ain't got nothing. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm just out here. Yeah, it'd be rough, but I'm not just out here anymore, right? It could be rough and it could be that I don't have a bed and I'm sleeping on the floor again, right? So just things to keep in mind. And then the last point that I'll make about the overnight thing is, sometimes it does look like something happened overnight. Like when you're looking at someone else's life or whatever the case might be, someone else's process. I'll just use social media as an example because obviously that's like, you know, what I'm doing. So sometimes we'll see someone that yesterday they had 1,000 followers, something went viral, tomorrow they have 100K, right? So in that case, you're like, okay, but that like defeats your whole argument because that did happen overnight. One day it was 1,000, the next day is 100,000, right? But the thing that we have to remember, again, in these times where you see everyone's life and you think you see in everyone's life, we don't know what the steps were that allowed for a viral video to happen and then for that quote unquote overnight shift or growth in following to happen, right? We don't know what those steps were. We don't know what type of personal development, how many years it took that person to even post something, right? Like, or to even get to the point of being able to create something that would go viral, right? We don't know. And it might not have even been something specific to social media. It might not have been something specific to video editing. It might have just been their own like subconscious, you know, patterns that changed or beliefs that changed. The point is we don't know. The other point is that something was happening little by little that allowed for this culmination in followers or whatever. And lastly, because I really didn't want to go on forever, but you know, it happens. This actually should be first, but trust God and trust in the timing of your life. And one of the ways that I've found really allows me to fully trust in God is to just start acting as if, which I know we hear all the time and can get kind of annoying because sometimes it's really difficult. Like for me, I'll use an example. I want to be a member of Equinox. There's a specific location that I want to be a member of, and it's like elite, like extreme luxury, all of that, which fits into the vision that I have for my life of maximum fulfillment, right? Right now, I'm not at Equinox. I'm at another gym, but what I do at that gym, you know, it's definitely not a luxury gym. They don't even have towels. Let me just put it out there. But it works, and it got the body in, so we're not mad. But there's times, like for example, when I'm doing track drills before I sprint, like my warm up, and there's no real space to do it. So I kind of have to carve out my own space. It gets annoying because then people will put their mats down in the place that I'm running. It's just a lot, right? But what I'll do is remember, because I actually took a tour of that Equinox so I could see the layout and see it in my mind. And so when I go to my regular low-key rinky-dink gym, I envision myself doing my track drills in a very specific spot at that equinox, at the exact equinox that I want to be in. Fine. Do I get the feeling of actually being there? Maybe not, but remember, the brain doesn't know the difference, like when you're imagining something and when you're actually experiencing something. So in a sense, I'm starting to shift the reality for my mind, which eventually the material can catch up to that, right? So yeah, acting as if, sometimes you have to get very creative, and sometimes it will feel like you're faking it, but the reality is sometimes that's just what it takes to get through the period of you wanting this thing that just hasn't happened yet, right? And it shows that like you have confidence, you believe like, yeah, it's coming regardless. So I'm gonna just start, preparing for it. Like I'm gonna act the same way that I would act if it was here. And I know for some people that's really difficult. And it could just be the situation, right? Sometimes it's just the situation is so overwhelming that it's so hard to imagine, being outside of that circumstance. And that is, again, when you go to God and literally ask, show me a way to see beyond these circumstances. Okay, I love you. And remember, it's literally happening as we speak. Every moment is adding up. And if you can really start to find a way to accept that, soon you're gonna wake up and be like, yo, this really happened overnight. Okay, so if you found this helpful, make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn your notifications on because we got more coming, baby. I'll see you in the next video.